Dash. The rain fell like quiet forgiveness over the cracked pavements of New York City, each drop tracing a silver thread through the darkness, reflecting the trembling glow of distant streetlights. In the middle of that storm, a man named Aaron stood under the worn awning of a 24-hour cafe tilde copyright, his coat soaked, his heart heavier than the city skyline above him. He had once been a name that echoed through financial circles: a banker, a strategist, the kind of man whose handshake could change the course of another man's life. But power, as he learned, is a fickle companion. It gives until it takes everything back. Tonight, all that remained of his empire was a single suitcase and the regret that burned deeper than the cold rain on his skin. Inside the cafe tilde copyright, the smell of coffee and freshly baked bread filled the air, wrapping around him like an invitation to forget his misfortunes for just one night. As he pushed open the door, the soft bell chimed a fragile sound in a world that had grown too loud for kindness. Behind the counter stood an older woman with kind eyes and silver hair tied in a bun. Her name tag read Evelyn. She looked up and smiled, not the forced politeness of city service but the kind of smile that seemed to reach the soul. "You look like you could use something warm," she said, her voice soft but certain. Aaron nodded without a word. He sat near the window, his hands trembling slightly as he removed his gloves. The city outside blurred into streaks of gold and gray. When Evelyn brought him a cup of coffee, he reached into his pocket only to realize he had nothing left, and not even $1. His throat tightened, shame rising like a wave. "Yeah, broken bar. I'm sorry, I don't have any money," he murmured. Evelyn placed the cup gently in front of him and smiled again. "Then tonight, it's on the house." Aaron looked up, confusion shadowed by disbelief. "Why?" he asked. "Because," she said simply, "I once had a night like yours, and someone gave me coffee too." Her words pierced through the fog of his despair, simple yet carrying the weight of an entire lifetime. He took the cup, warmth seeping into his frozen hands, and for the first time in months, he felt something like gratitude. Hours passed, and the cafe tilde copyright emptied. The storm eased into a drizzle. Aaron sat silently, lost in thought, while Evelyn cleaned tables, humming softly to an old tune from the radio. "Why do you still run this place at your age?" he asked suddenly. Evelyn chuckled. "Because it reminds me that people are still good, even when the world forgets." Her words stayed with him long after he left. That night, he found shelter in a small church on 6th Avenue, where the priest offered him a cat and a blanket. As he lay there staring at the cracked ceiling, Evelyn's face appeared in his mind, kind, unwavering, and human. He made a silent promise: one day, when life gave him a chance again, he would repay that kindness. But fate is rarely kind twice in a row. The following months tested him beyond measure. He worked odd jobs, cleaning subways, loading trucks, fixing lights in run-down apartments. Yet through it all, he carried that memory like a candle in a storm. One evening, while working at a construction site, a small girl approached him. She was selling hand-painted bookmarks, her clothes thin against the winter chill. "Mister, will you buy one? It's for my mom's medicine," she said, holding them up shyly. Aaron hesitated, his wallet almost empty. But then he remembered Evelyn's voice. "Here, someone gave me coffee too." He smiled gently and handed her his last $5. "Keep the bookmark," he said. "Just promise me something'll help someone else one day." The girl grinned and nodded before running off into the snow. It was a small act, almost invisible in the vastness of the city, but in that moment, Aaron felt alive again. The next morning, he woke to find a letter slipped under his door. It was from the foreman of the construction company, offering him a permanent position as site supervisor. It wasn't glamour, but it was stability. Slowly, piece by piece, life began to rebuild itself around him. 5 years passed. Aaron was no longer the man who stood trembling in the rain. He had saved enough to open a small repair shop near the harbor, a place where fishermen, laborers, and immigrants came to fix broken radios, lamps, or sometimes, simply to talk. He named the shop Second Chance. Above the counter hung a photo of a steaming cup of coffee, a silent tribute to the woman who had once believed in him without asking for anything in return. Then, one afternoon, as the sun poured through the dusty windows, the door opened, and a familiar figure stepped in. It was Evelyn, older but still glowing with that same quiet strength. "You kept your promise," she said softly, eyes glistening as she read the name on the shop sign. Aaron smiled, his voice breaking slightly. "I had to. You showed me what kindness looks like when the world turns its back." They sat together that evening, sharing stories over coffee once again, just like that night years ago. But what neither of them knew was that their simple bond would soon set off a chain of kindness that would touch thousands. Months turned into years, and the little repair shop called Second Chance became something of a legend in the harbor district. Fishermen would drop by not just to fix things but to leave behind small acts of gratitude, a loaf of bread, a note, a story. Strangers began paying for others' repairs without leaving names, and on the shop wall, Aaron began pinning those anonymous notes under a handwritten sign that read, "Kindness keeps the world together." One rainy evening, as the harbor lights shimmered across the rippling water, a young man entered the shop carrying a broken radio. His hands were calloused, his eyes tired, and when he spoke, there was an accent Middle Eastern, soft but proud. "Can you fix this?" he asked, placing it on the counter. Aaron nodded, gently opening the back of the radio. As he worked, the young man sat quietly, glancing around at the walls filled with thank you letters and photos. "What is this place?" he finally asked. Aaron smiled. "It's a place where broken things get another chance, just like people." The young man's eyes glistened as he whispered, "My mother used to say that too." When the repair was done, Aaron pushed the radio toward him. "It's working again. No charge." The boy looked stunned. "But I can't let you do that." "You can," Aaron replied softly. "Just promise me you'll pass it on." The boy hesitated before nodding. "I will." The next morning, Aaron found a letter taped to his shop door. Inside was a small photo of a woman in a hijab holding a basket of flowers, smiling beside a handwritten message, "For those who gave us hope, we give it forward." Below it was an I Am Foundation for Women and Refugees. Aaron's hands trembled. He recognized the name from a story he had seen years ago on Linnea, the Syrian waitress who turned cruelty into compassion, the one who had built a community center for displaced women. He couldn't believe that the young man who had come to his shop the night before was her son. In that moment, Aaron understood that kindness was not a straight line, it was a circle, always finding its way back home. Days later, the same young man returned, this time with a camera crew. "My mother would like to meet you," he said with a shy smile. Aaron blinked in surprise, the reality washing over him slowly. Within a week, a small car pulled up outside Second Chance, and a woman stepped out, graceful and calm. She wore a light scarf, her presence gentle but commanding. It was Mayam, the woman whose story had once restored millions of hearts online, now stood in front of the man whose life had been rebuilt by one act of coffee and compassion. When their eyes met, there was an unspoken understanding, a connection woven by the invisible threads of kindness that neither of them had planned but both had believed in. "I heard about your shop," Mayam said, her accent melodic. "Your idea of second chances reminded me of something my father used to tell me before the war. Even broken wings can remember how to fly." Aaron's throat tightened. "Your story inspired me before I even knew who you were," he admitted quietly. "A woman once showed me mercy when I thought I didn't deserve it. She saved my soul with a cup of coffee. I built this shop because of her." Mayam smiled, her eyes soft. "Then maybe it's time we build something bigger together." That one sentence changed everything. Over the next months, Aaron and Mayam launched a joint initiative called the Bridge Project, a network that helped refugees, veterans, and homeless families learn trade skills, offering them tools, education, and most importantly, dignity. They opened small workshops across the city, each one carrying the motto Aaron had written on his shop wall, "Kindness keeps the world together." The project spread across states, then countries, as volunteers began joining from all walks of life via students, retirees, single mothers, ex-soldiers, each of them touched in some way by an act of kindness that had once seemed small. The media picked up their story, calling them the builders of hope. But for Aaron and Mayam, it was never about fame. It was about people, the ones who came in lost and left with purpose. One such person was Rosa, a single mother who had fled an abusive home with her 2 children. When she first entered the Bridge Center, she could barely speak from the trauma she carried. Mayam took her hand, smiled gently, and whispered, "You're safe here." Months later, Rosa was leading workshops, teaching sewing and language skills to other women. Her laughter filled the halls that had once echoed with silence. Another was Malik, a former soldier who had lost his leg in combat and his will to live along with it. Aaron worked with him patiently in the repair shop, showing him how to fix radios and build small devices. "It's not about what you lost," Aaron told him one evening. "It's about what you still have to give." Malik smiled for the first time in years. Slowly, piece by piece, kindness became the architecture of a new world around them. Then, one winter evening, tragedy struck. Evelyn, the woman whose cup of coffee had started it all, passed away quietly in her sleep. When Aaron received the call, he stood still for a long moment, the world suddenly too quiet. Mayam found him sitting in the corner of the workshop, staring at an old photo on the wall of the one of Evelyn behind her cafe-tilde copyright counter. Smiling, "She was my beginning," he whispered. Mayam knelt beside him, her voice soft. "Then let her be everyone's beginning. We'll name the new center after her." And so they did. The Evelyn Grace Center opened its doors that spring, a vast, sunlit building near the Hudson River, filled with classrooms, workshops, and gardens. At its entrance stood a statue of intertwined hands holding a cup of coffee and a rosy, of the symbols of 2 stories that had crossed oceans to find each other. On the opening day, thousands came, people whose lives had been touched directly or indirectly by the chain of kindness that had started years ago in a small cafe told the copyright. Aaron stood on stage, his voice trembling as he addressed the crowd. "This," he said, "is what happens when one person chooses to care. One cup of coffee, one act of mercy, one decision to believe in someone again. That's all it takes to change everything." Mayam stepped beside him, her eyes shining as she added, "Kindness is not charity. It's recognition that every heart, no matter how broken, deserves to be seen, to be heard, to be loved." The audience rose to their feet, applause thunderous and tearful. For the first time, Aaron felt complete.